I got married to a man who liked me even though I was fragile and shy. I thought we were happy, but while I was in the hospital, my husband met a beautiful divorced woman. He decided to leave me, saying I didn't work and wanted $800 a month as compensation. He went ahead with the divorce coldly. My name's Michelle, and I quietly work in an office at a real estate company. I've never been particularly interested in real estate or office work. Since I was a kid, I've been physically weak and sometimes end up in the hospital because of my internal organs, though it's not life-threatening. People were worried if I could work, especially with my health issues, but my parents suggested I try office work. I've been managing fine, even with occasional hospital stays. I've been doing well at my job, and my colleagues understand my situation. I met my husband Tony at a social gathering set up by a friend, kind of like a group blind date. I wasn't sure about romance because I thought my fragility would be a problem for anyone. I didn't date much, and before I knew it, I was over 30. My friend encouraged me, saying, "You should find someone who understands you, Michelle. Your condition doesn't affect your daily life much. Let's stay positive." So she invited me to an event. I didn't think it would work out. There were 3 men, one of whom I liked, but he seemed interested in another woman. I didn't feel particularly attractive, and the other women there seemed prettier. I had given up on finding someone there, but then Tony, who later became my husband, approached me. He was thoughtful, offering me soft drinks since I didn't drink much. But as I listened to him, I realized he wasn't the one I wanted to be close to. I dreamed of marrying someone like a top actress. Hearing his confidence made me wonder about him and even feel a bit repelled. However, despite that, he kept talking to me. He asked, "What kind of guy do you like, Michelle? Do you want to get married?" Because I was eager to get married soon, Tony kept talking to me, showing persistence. At first, I thought he was shallow, but we exchanged contacts. Surprisingly, Tony kept contacting me frequently, even asking me out. Gradually, my feelings for him grew. However, I was still worried. Why would a man with high standards and a seemingly shallow nature be interested in someone like me? When I shared my concerns about my fragile health with a friend, they explained that guys often want to appear strong and impressive at first. Despite that, my friend said Tony really seemed to like me. Believing this, I started to see Tony differently, and we grew closer. Eventually, we got married, and our first year together was truly happy. We lived in a spacious and affordable apartment that I found. Interestingly, my health issues almost disappeared, and I didn't have to go to the hospital while I was with Tony. Maybe being with him helped improve my health. Tony was considerate, and I felt confident that marrying him was the right decision. However, after a year, I started noticing changes in Tony's attitude towards me despite my weak health. ChatGPT. I managed to do basic housework, and I always cooked meals. Tony used to praise my cooking, which made me happy. But gradually, he stopped complimenting and even started complaining about the food. He'd say things like, "Is the soup a bit bland today?" Or, "I'm not really in the mood for meat today." I'm not great at cooking, so making the same tasty meal every day is tough. But until then, he never complained. Also, I can't guess what Tony wants to eat unless he tells me. I was shocked when he said he wasn't in the mood for something. Still, I loved Tony and wanted to meet his expectations. However, his attitude towards me got worse. When he came home from work, he used to cheerfully greet me with, "I'm home. Worked hard today." But he stopped doing that and instead said, "I'm tired. I want to do something fun," showing no interest. Our habit of going out on days off also disappeared. When I suggested going somewhere, he'd coldly reply, "I'm too tired to go anywhere. If you want to go, go by yourself." His behavior seemed odd, and I started feeling my health deteriorating again. It's like my body reflected my growing anxiety. Then Tony started coming home late from work and going out with friends on his days off, saying he wanted to rest. "I'll be back soon," disregarding me entirely. This behavior went beyond just being odd. It started to breed distrust in me. At the same time, my physical condition began to resemble the times I had health issues in the past. If this continued, I would end up hospitalized again, and I wanted to avoid that. Hospital stays usually last about 2 weeks, something I'd rather avoid. So I wanted to talk to Tony about our situation. One day, when he returned from an errand, I asked him honestly, "Hey, you've been acting strange, haven't you? You're cold towards me. Have you started to dislike me? If you have something to say, say it. Otherwise, I'll go crazy." But he, perhaps drunk, bluntly spoke his true feelings to me, saying, I'm not doing anything with you. I haven't started to hate you, but I don't love you anymore. Are you misunderstanding something? I dated you and even married you, you know. Besides, your income is low. I'm just stressed because there's nothing fun to do. He spoke in a detached manner. His clear and blunt words left me speechless and caused deep emotional hurt. The anger and sadness that followed were overwhelming. It was as if he didn't care about me anymore. Essentially, he had reluctantly dated and married me. This reminded me of when we first met at the mixer. I realized he had his sights on another woman. When she showed interest in another man, he turned to me, the leftover one. I thought his eagerness to marry was genuine, and I was his only viable option at that time. My fears about him being frivolous and not serious about someone like me were confirmed. As these thoughts raced through my mind, my health worsened. There was one thing I wanted to correct in Tony's words, but I no longer felt the need or desire to say it. Not wanting Tony's care, I called my workplace to inform them of my impending episode and took a taxi to the hospital. After a 2-week stay, I returned home still uncertain about how to proceed with Tony. But upon my return, he said something completely unexpected. "Oh, you're back. Did you get some rest?" I was surprised. "I knew you were weak, but I didn't expect you to be hospitalized." His way of speaking showed no concern for me at all. Thinking back, he never visited me once while I was in the hospital. True, I hadn't mentioned frequent hospitalizations when we were dating, and this was my first hospitalization since we had been together. Maybe that's why he reacted this way. But his shocking statements were yet to come. "But taking it easy in the hospital, that's a nice life, huh? Earning so little and still taking time off. Naturally, your income will decrease. I don't want to continue this boring life anymore. I'm done. A wife who doesn't work is worthless. Let's get a divorce." Tony said this without any remorse. I was dumbstruck by his sudden declaration. Then he added, "Actually, I decided something while you were in the hospital. I've decided to marry this woman." He showed me a photo on his smartphone of a very beautiful woman, his new girlfriend. It confirmed what I always knew. He likes beautiful women. This woman is my childhood friend. I was surprised at how beautiful she's become when we met by chance recently. He grinned as he explained this to me. Moreover, regarding our separation, he said, "The reason for the divorce is your fault. I'm the victim because I have a wife who doesn't work. So you should pay me compensation of $800 a month. It's your punishment for using me for so long." He expected me to pay despite thinking my income was low and him, the victim. How twisted could his thinking be? I was shocked to face such a situation soon after returning from the hospital, but I quickly regained my composure and honestly thought, this means I can separate from him right away. Deep down, I had already reached this conclusion. It's best to part ways with him. But divorcing so soon after getting married. Surprisingly, I was conscious of what others would think. However, his current behavior was a wake-up call. I decided to accept his demands, so I took out the divorce papers I had prepared earlier, signed my name, and handed them to him. "All right, if you have a new fiancé, I understand. Here are the divorce papers. Sign them quickly," I said. He looked surprised for once and said, "Oh, that was quick. Sometimes you do think. Now we can get divorced." He signed the papers, grinning, and handed them back to me, saying, "Don't forget about the compensation. Start transferring it by the end of this month." Then he went back to his room. He must have been surprised. He didn't expect me to comply so easily. But I had been contemplating divorce anyway. It was just a matter of time. However, I hadn't accepted everything he said. Compensation, that's another story which he'll realize later. A week or so after moving out of the house I shared with Tony, my health was stable, and I was going about my daily life. After work one day, I checked my phone and saw over 200 missed calls from an unknown number. What? Over 200 missed calls? When I opened the history, Tony's name was listed repeatedly. Seeing this, I couldn't help but feel relieved because I knew why he had been calling. When I called him back, his panic was obvious. "Hey, I got a demand for $50,000 in compensation. That's too much, don't you think?" But how could he not understand without an explanation? "Well, you were cheating on me with your fiancé. While we were still married, right?" Was her name Hillary Johnson? "She's really beautiful, isn't she?" He was flustered when I mentioned her name. "What are you talking about? More importantly, how do you know her name?" The answer was simple. Why do I know? Because I hired a detective. Your actions were obviously suspicious, so I decided to ask for a little help. They contacted me right away, saying it was a definite case. They even showed me proof photos. According to the latest information, you had her stay over at our house just 3 days ago. Right, by the way, I filed for divorce the day before yesterday, so we were still married 3 days ago. Telling him this, he looked like he was about to explode. He had demanded compensation from me, but this was why I refused to accept that part. Detectives are amazing, but they sure cost a lot of money. When I mentioned that, he nervously asked, "That's true, but you don't have that kind of money, do you?" But that was just his misconception. Indeed, my salary as an office worker wasn't significant, but now I'm ready to reveal the truth. I wanted to counter when he called me low income, but I do have about $400,000 in rental income. The reason being, my father is the president of the real estate company. I work for the company passed down from my great-grandfather, which owns roughly 100 buildings and apartments. My father put several of those properties in my name, perhaps his way of showing love. So, the rent from those properties goes into my account. However, he always told me to do my best in my office job. Tony always assumed I was just a weak, low-income office worker but was quite shocked to learn the truth. Seriously, you should have said that earlier. He realized he had let go of a big fish. If he had treasured me, he could have had a lot of fun, but his misfortune didn't end there. So, the apartment you're living in now is actually mine. I just picked it because it was vacant. That's why there was no rent, but if you continue living there, the rent is $2,000 a month. Looks like your entire monthly salary is going to be gone. He always claimed I was low income, but his salary wasn't great either. That's why I chose one of my properties for him. Now it might be too late to tell him. And then another tragedy struck him. The beautiful fiancée, Hillary, apparently got to know the truth. It seems she was being claimed for compensation as his affair partner, and naturally, the engagement was called off, and she disappeared from Tony's life. Tony, having spent his meager salary and even borrowed money to impress Hillary, ended up with nothing in the end. It's a result of his arrogance and lack of effort, thinking he could land a big catch without trying. As a result, Tony lost his wife, his home, and his new fiancé in an instant. All that remained was his considerable debt. Finally, he said to me, "Hey, let's give it another try. You're the one for me, after all." Such a desperate statement. But without it, he would have an even more boring life than before. However, as far as I'm concerned, he no longer means anything to me. But you would say you were just with me because you had no choice, right? Don't worry about me. I'll be fine, I replied casually and decided to end the call. His calls continued, but they were so annoying that I blocked his number. Since then, he has been evicted from the apartment and lives in a shabby place, struggling with debt. He works from morning till night, but another hardship hit him. Hillary's acquaintances, tough-looking guys, found out where he lived and started threatening him. "You're going to pay the compensation she's being charged with too." While their methods are forceful, what they say isn't unreasonable. After all, Hillary was deceived. Thus, Tony's debt only grew. Now he's so dispirited that no one wants anything to do with him. As for me, I'm in good health, free from major stress. The episodes have stopped, and overcoming this huge obstacle has perhaps made me mentally stronger. My office work no longer suffers, and my parents are happy. Now I focus on not stressing myself and being honest with my feelings. When asked about my next relationship, I think I'll stay away from it for a while. Work has become enjoyable, and I find it fulfilling. Before thinking about romance, I plan to travel, something I couldn't do before due to my health concerns.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the ninth grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.